Not going anywhere, though, of course, because we are broadcasting live until 2 a.m. And we've been preparing for a live crossing to Estcourt. That's where we believe the former President Jacob Zuma is being taken to a correctional center there. Aviwe Mtila is joining us live. Aviwe, what's happening? You know, we're all waiting for that convoy to make its way somewhere. We're hearing it's going to be there.
Yes, everyone is waiting for that convoy, Shahan. Even the police outside the Estcourt Correctional Services here, waiting in anticipation together with the Correctional Services officials. This is just one of the spots that is heavily guarded just around the fairly new prison that was only opened in 2019. Understand it takes in 512 prisoners, and we're expecting the former president to be making his way soon anytime. I can see lights further down there, but I can tell you even further on the other side of the road there's a heavy police presence there of about 8 police vehicles, some of them unmarked and heavily armed. But we see now there's a motorcade. I'm guessing it's making its way in. We're going to try to get a bit closer there. I'm going to ask my colleague Tabane just to even try to go handheld as we try to bring you those visuals closer, because there seems to be some movement going in towards the prison entrance now, which has been quite heavily guarded itself. You remember Leranzo Tema, the police ministry spokesperson, in fact confirming that the former president is in police custody at the moment. But we were expecting him to then be escorted to the Estcourt Correctional Services. Even in meeting some of the police vans along the way, they did confirm that, in fact, he'll be making his way here. And even the police officials we spoke to on the entrance further down did confirm that. We're going to try to get a bit closer with my colleague Tabane there to get you a better picture of what's happening. They're a bit bright, those lights there, but it's a convoy making its way in this very moment. We can assume that that convoy should be carrying the former president Jacob Zuma, as we expected the deadline to come to an end at midnight for him, given that constitutional court judgment last week. It looks like that convoy is still making its way inside Estcourt prison this very moment, assuming it's carrying the former president, as we do understand even from that media communique from Leranzo Tema, the spokesperson of the police ministry, suggesting that he was in police custody there in preparation then to be moved to the Estcourt Correctional Service. Fairly new correctional service, I might add, but in front of us, of course, it is heavily guarded there. You can see the policemen with those shotguns in hand, even the correctional services officials with the shotgun in hand. I'm not sure if my colleague can go handheld as we try to get closer to the facility itself. We see the cars making their way in towards the fence area, which we are in at the moment, making their way in here. It looks like the convoy is those black SUVs. I'm trying to look for that presidential coat of arms on the side there, just to confirm maybe if he's escorted. Yes, it has those presidential coat of arms on the side, which is one of the other assurances that the person in there is the former president Jacob Zuma. It has those coat of arms confirming that that's most likely, almost certain at this stage, that the former president has been sent inside the Estcourt Correctional Service at this very moment. The convoy that you're seeing going inside there is the former president Jacob Zuma at this stage. You see the heavy police presence even inside as the president has been ushered in to serve what we understand is his 15-month prison sentence. But of course, there are those issues that are playing out in court. For example, we're expecting the High Court in Pietermaritzburg just on Friday to determine whether the president could be out, given that he has that pending matter still at the highest court in the land, of the Constitutional Court, to rescind his particular matter. And we could possibly see, given the outcome of that, the release of him soon enough. But at this moment, we just saw that convoy with that presidential coat of arms confirming that it is, in fact, former President Jacob Zuma. We're even seeing another police van joining in on this side here, but we do see heavy police presence. And this is just one side, Shahan, that has that heavy police presence. Even on the other side, on the front side, not far from where we are at this moment, some 200 meters, there's even a heavier police presence there on the entrance side. They were trying to even keep it on a hush in terms of the police. Behind us as well, there are police vehicles just guarding the Estcourt Correctional Services, as we saw that convoy go in moments ago, carrying the former President Jacob Zuma, as it was communicated by the South African Police Service, confirming earlier on that they had stuck to the Constitutional Court judgment and the President was in their custody. But now we just saw that change with the former President, I beg your pardon, being at the fairly newly built Estcourt Correctional Services, you understand, opened in 2019, carries a capacity of 512 inmates, and the former President at this stage, Shahan, almost certain that he is one of the inmates that will be sleeping here this morning.
All right, Aviwe, I'm going to let you catch your breath, and while we show these live visuals, I'm going to take our viewers through the facility where the former president is being held. It costs 387 million rand. It's been called a state-of-the-art correctional center in Estcourt, and the Minister of Justice at the time, Michael Masuta, opening the facility, saying that it had a mandate to create a humane system where the weakest inmates feel safe, where all are treated with respect, where all inmates are meaningfully occupied and expected to improve themselves, where inmates can strengthen links with their families and prepare for their release. Now, as Aviwe says, this prison consists of 2 units with a capacity to accommodate 512 inmates. It also has a hospital section, a training center, maintenance workshop, logistics, and other support structures, which is why it's been called a state-of-the-art correctional services facility. There is no doubt that Jacob Zuma will be treated quite carefully in this prison, given his position of former president of the country. We do know that he will now be processed. We're not sure exactly where, which wing of this prison he'll be held. But Jacob Zuma will no doubt be spending this morning, the 8th of July, in a police cell, well, in a prison cell, I should say, hey JJ, a prison cell in a democratic South Africa. A former president has been jailed for the first time in the history of our democracy. Aviwe, we're going to stay in your visuals, and I'll bring JJ Tabane in to talk over these visuals. It's a moment that'll go down in history, JJ. This time, 1:26 a.m. on the 8th of July.
Unprecedented stuff. I can tell you now, even activists, Shahan, in NGOs, in churches, or in other political, never anticipated ever that Jacob Zuma would see the inside of a prison cell. In many ways, as I was saying earlier on in that debate with Mzwana, he brought this onto himself. Because just imagine, if he did go to the state capture and he got proper legal advice to say, go there, answer, it was going to be maybe another year before he's even charged with theft, with fraud, with all the things that were told at the State Capture Commission that he spent 9 years doing when he was in office. It was going to take another year, maybe another 2 years. And then a case by the NPA trying to prosecute him for state capture. I mean, as Zanele was correctly saying, some of the witnesses, the things are so nebulous that probably if that was going to be taken to court, it was going to take years and years to prove and what have you. So in a sense, I'm not quite sure what informed the defiance, except a sense of what one can call, an exaggerated sense of defiance, an exaggerated sense of, being able to escape like he has done for the last 15 years, which I think, if he looks at his own track record of running away from the law, he had maybe every reason to believe that it is possible. Hence, his lawyer said, I will take you to this court, that court, the other. And then Judge Zondo said, oh, I see this, their strategy. I'm not going to fall for that. Let me go straight to the highest court because I only have 6 months. At that time, he was meant to end, Shahan, as you know, in June. So I think that the context really, although we don't have to celebrate someone being incarcerated, is that there's a part of it that we need to be honest by saying Jacob Zuma brought it down to himself by behaving as if he is above the law. We see now, as we are looking at those visuals, that it is truly has come to pass. I don't think many commentators anticipated it. You just have to look at the conversations that's been happening throughout today. Very few people really thought the arrest was going to happen. They say, no, it's not going to happen. This cannot happen. It is unprecedented, etc. But as we have seen in South Africa, you must never, Shahan, take anything for granted. It's happening as we speak that Jacob Zuma is now going to spend the night in prison. What does it mean for him? We need to ask ourselves, what does it mean for him and his family? He has said in the court papers that are going to the Concourt on Monday that this is tantamount to a death sentence. Very, very serious articulation there. So it's going to be up to the correctional services to make sure that nothing goes wrong, because you can imagine, politically, I don't think Senator Ramaphosa, who's been missing in action, I must add, right, over the last couple of days, wants to see a situation where the demise of Jacob Zuma happens in his watch, in his correctional facility, under ministers that are supposed to make sure that prisoners are safe, etc. So I think, as you are correctly saying, he won't be treated like anybody else, unfortunately. He'll be treated in terms of a high-risk category of a prisoner that he indeed is.
Yeah. Aviwe, let's bring you back into this because you're there live for us. Let's talk about the processing here and, of course, the concerns that Jacob Zuma raised, especially on Sunday and through court papers, about him being at risk in a prison, especially with COVID-19. There is no doubt that all of that precaution, those measures will be put in place to make sure that he possibly has his own cell because of who he is, and then the measures are there to protect him from contracting COVID-19.
So that's part of the medical evaluation, Shahan, that is going to happen any time now, 6 hours from the time that he's been arrested. You'd understand the first process is him being brought in by the police, accompanied by the police into the prison itself, the Correctional Services Center, where they then start the preparations. They have to come with that J7 form, which is the warrant of arrest, essentially, going into the prison. And then thereafter, the processes follow. That 6 hour period for their medical examination has to be underway from this moment, as well as a mental evaluation going forward, and thereafter just the risks involved as well. You understand this hospital, state of the art, it has a hospital wing as well. So after he's been assessed for those, well, within that period of 6 hours, the next step then is to evaluate what risk of a prisoner he will be. You'd understand there are 3 categories that the prisoners are then filtered into. It's a high risk, a medium and a low risk prisoner. That, of course, is dependent on the jail sentence itself. Given that, even speaking to Sibonga Kona Mumalo, who's the National Correctional Services spokesperson, suggested that it's only a 15-month sentence for former President Jacob Zuma. In fact, he is an elderly man, so he can't be in a cell with your 20, 30 or 40-year-olds. He'll probably be in a low-risk inmate together with other elderly inmates inside. Of course, those differentiate in terms of the security levels as well. You'd understand the high-risk prisoners are those that are guarded by large numbers of security, while the low-risk prisoners are the ones, some of them almost finishing the end of their term, some of them, a lot of them elderly, they have those health risks, so they're not as guarded as those high-risk prisoners would be. So we're expecting the former president to now undergo that evaluation within the next 6 hours, then after be placed. Most likely going to be one of the low-risk inmates.
Yeah. Aviwe Mtila, stay there for us. We're going to come back to you throughout this last half hour of the show, because there are so many people who are still watching to see exactly what has been unfolding. And if you can, you were at the Westville prison earlier, and let's perhaps unpack how this all unfolded and how media houses has to work around the information we're given and the information we hear via sources, etc. You had to speed from Durban, Westville to Estcourt to get this shot for us live on television. Just talk us through the information we received and why we were positioned where we were and how we ended up here. Let's explain this game of television news to our viewers, especially with Jacob Zuma in that correctional services facility behind you.
Shahan, it's one of those stories that is difficult to navigate around, because you'd understand everyone is keeping their cards close to their chest, especially the officials. You approach the police, for example, they don't want to tell you. They tell you this information is secret. They're on almost like a secret mission. They don't want it exposed. You go from one point to another. I spoke to the correctional services people. They told me that they haven't prepared anything at that stage. There's not much information they can give, given that their only role is when the president finally arrives at the Correctional Services Center. We've been going from pillar to post, essentially, to try and get you the visuals that you just saw now, Shahan. But of course, it takes journey upon journey. You wouldn't believe that at around 11 o'clock, I was outside the Westville prison at that time, anticipating the president to be there, given that that order by Justice Kapembe was served to the head of the Westville Correctional Service. So that's where a lot of media even were anticipating this would happen. You'd even see the crossings that we did earlier on in the day. Correctional spokesperson also Ungumalo also confirming that he's most likely going to be there. But of course, a news circulates, Shahan, and we heard that that might not be the case. In fact, it might be the Estcourt correctional facility that the former president will be in. That will then change the whole game. Now we have to go. In fact, it's not only our particular work on the ground, but a whole effort from the entire newsroom, where we checking our sources wherever they are. And we came to pinpoint this particular point, and as it would happen, that we got at that particular time, that where we saw the visuals that we just gave you now, the former president, unprecedented times, essentially, where former statesmen behind bars undergoing that medical evaluation at this very moment, to be part of those 512 inmates at the Estcourt Correctional Services. Spending the night, tomorrow will be counted among those as they close normally the prisons late afternoon. He'll be counted among those that will be sleeping here.
Yeah. JJ, let's bring you in as well. Aviwe, just pan for us so that we can see the Correctional Services facility while JJ talks over these visuals. So, JJ, I've been trying to think of a way of putting this in something that we'll remember for the rest of our lives. But I also want to talk about the ANC and the history, right? Because as you were saying earlier, you cannot forget the ANC's history in our fight for this democracy we have. And this democracy is showing us that no one is above the law, because we're seeing a former president of the democratic state in prison. And we need to keep that in mind, but also not forget that regardless of what you did for this country, you cannot go against the very principles of our law and order, because this is where you will end up.
That's a textbook definition of the rule of law, right? Because the opposite of the rule of law is where there are people who can tramp onto the law. And unfortunately, if you look at a couple of jurisdictions across the world and across the continent in particular, you find that, Shahan, people who were liberators, right, who took their country out of the clutches of colonialism, once they are in power, right, they then almost tend to become like those colonizers, because they believe that their country owes them something from a point of view of the work that they have done to liberate the country. And it's something that we have to combat actively. It has happened. I mean, if I take my favorite example would be Zimbabwe, right? If you compare what Mugabe did to bring that place into freedom, and you look at the last, say, decade that he spent there, it's like you chalk and cheese. You want to say, but this can't be the same person. It can't be the same person who is colluding with the security forces, is destroying the economy. You're making the country that used to be a basket of the world. That Zimbabwe could feed the entire continent for the next 20 years. But now it has become a basket case because at some point power gets to people and then they forget what they fought for. So yes, we grant Zuma obviously and his comrades the credit of having brought us here. Nobody can second guess the role that the likes of Jacob Zuma played in bringing us freedom. But that freedom is not free. People had to die, etc. And we need to be able to, in a sense, respect that by ensuring that we don't make that freedom, to lose its salt, so to speak. And what is its salt? Part of its salt is to say, we've written a set of rules in a constitution, all of us have to obey it. And to do that, we have to constantly keep each other in check. If we don't do that, we must forget it. It's not impossible for South Africa to become a failed state. It's not. In 2009, I was on a television interview in a public broadcaster, and Tsepiso Makwetla asked me to say, but you are being dramatic to think that we can ever be like Zimbabwe. You are, in fact, I think that he said that this is hyperbole. But actually, and I said to her, people in Zimbabwe never thought that they would be carrying dollars in what is called wheelbarrows, right? They never thought they would be queuing for a piece of steak or fuel. And 20 years earlier, if you said that to them, they would think that you are crazy. But we had come to a point where South Africa had to borrow Zimbabwe electricity. They had to borrow Zimbabwe money. People had to queue. People had to cross the border. It's not an accident that we've got millions of Zimbabweans who would rather live here than in their country. Do you want South Africa to be like that? No. But are we going to do something to make sure that doesn't happen? We have to. We have to all play our part, Shahan, in ensuring that that doesn't happen. So today's moment, it's a moment of reflection, the same way that the Concord judgment was a moment that gathers us together around why did we fight the struggle? Why did so many people die so that we can be here? It's sad to see Jacob Zuma in jail. I don't think anybody must celebrate incarceration. But as I was saying throughout the evening, now the morning, it's a crossroad. You've got to take a path. You've got to take a path, and that path is not going to be easy. Edward Zuma is already threatening us again to say there's going to be a fight. I don't doubt that the coalition of the wounded are going to do everything now to make Cyril Ramaphosa's life a misery. Because remember, at the end of the day, he may be quiet, he may be missing in action, but the police would not have done it without his say-so. Bekitsele, I'm sure, had to consult him, the same way he tried to consult the courts to make sure that he's not alone in this thing. It's not seen as a Bekitsele thing, but it's a thing that the entire government is saying the Concord has done its job in terms of the constitution. The executive must also do its job. Now, citizens have to do their work. We don't want people thinking that if they riot enough, we could reverse the law and have a political solution, because we have seen that happening way too many times. In 2009, Jacob Zuma ensured that he doesn't get prosecuted, and he got the NEC of the ANC, the highest decision-making body, to actually make a decision that says he doesn't have to respect the law. Now, today we shouldn't be surprised when he thinks he could do that again, because it's a habit that needs to be broken, and South Africans have to stand firm and say, we know it's sad that an elder statesman must go to prison, but at the same time, what choice do we have to build a country that we can all be proud of?
Yeah, let's stay on these visuals live and take a listen to Mzwanele Manyi, of course, the spokesperson for the Jacob Zuma Foundation. We spoke to him a little earlier. He's still, of course, maintaining that the Zondo Commission has been unfair to Jacob Zuma.
The constitution of this country, the supreme law of the land, is very clear about how this commission should have been set up in the first place.
No.
And it's another point that as a foundation we have a problem with, that if something is messed up at a foundational level, then that thing is messed up. This commission should have been appointed by President Zuma, should have been set up by President Zuma, but instead he played a clerical role. They had a 50-50 joint venture with Justice Mogoeng, where he selected the judge on the recommendations of Thulima Donsela.
Yeah.
And the recommendation was that we shall give President Zuma a list of one, and he can't move from that. And therefore, President Zuma just did a clerical function on this thing. So therefore, even at a foundational level, this commission was not set up properly, as it were. Even in its execution of its role, it was meant to be doing the issues around state capture and all of that, where President Zuma was accused of having abdicated his executive authority. So what this commission should have done is to have summoned the entire executive to go and account in terms of how they experienced President Zuma as somebody who, for lack of a better word, had abdicated his responsibility and had created a puppet state, if you like, where strings are pulled elsewhere. The whole executive should have been there to go and account whether were they able to run their departments as per the mandates of the law, as it were. All 34 ministers should have been there, but they were not there. All that has happened in that commission, truth be told, is just to unravel an important thing, which is corruption.
All right, let's bring Aviwe Mtila back into the conversation. Aviwe, we're still live on your visuals of the facility there in Estcourt. For the benefit of those who might have woken up, you know, those insomniacs who can't sleep and they're tuning into ENCA to see exactly what's happening, tell us where you are and what has happened, because this is something we'll remember forever.
Well, outside the Estcourt Correctional Services, where about some 20 or so minutes ago, former president of the country, Jacob Zuma, his convoy made its way inside here. Now, those processes that normally happen, I'm assuming are happening this very moment, Shahan, where that medical examination and that mental examination of the former president is underway, and the risks that are currently being evaluated now are underway. Do you remember that the moment that he arrives here with that police delegation as well, he's expected to hand over the J7 form, which is the warrant of arrest. Therefore, he is the property, let me put it that way, of the Correctional Services Center, where those checks are done. It's expected to be done within the period of 6 hours, where he's evaluated for his mental being, his health being, and just evaluating the risk, because from there on he's then allocated a cell according to his risk levels. Of course, you'd know that inmates are categorized into 3 separate risk factors. They are high-risk inmates, the medium, and then the low-risk inmates. Depending on your age, depending on the severity of the crime itself and the length of the crime itself, you'd understand former President Jacob Zuma has been sentenced for 15 months, so that's not a lengthy time in its own. Other mitigating factors for him will also be his age, 79-year-old, not much of a high-risk inmate at this stage. Even in a conversation I had with the Correctional Services spokesperson, saying that given even just those 2 factors alone are most likely going to put him among the low-risk inmates inside here, which majority of them are the elderly. You'd understand that it wouldn't make sense to put him among the youngsters, 20-year-olds, 30 or 40-year-olds that could have their way with an elderly person, especially a former statesman, in the prison cell. So we're expecting him to be deemed a low risk here, but those processes underway as we saw that convoy, Shahan, go in here. Unprecedented times, really. A former statesman, former President Jacob Zuma, entering the Estcourt Correctional Services. I understand state-of-the-art facility on its own, has a hospital wing for any medical needs that the former president may have. We understand it costs some 387 million rand. Just maybe need to check that figure, but I think it's somewhere around there. It's got around 512 inmates in it, and former president is going to be one of those that will be counted among them tomorrow, as we're expecting that head count officially to happen, with him being an inmate tomorrow, where the cells will be locked with the former president behind there.
Yeah, JJ, of course, we spoke to Pule Mabe just after 1 o'clock, and he was saying it's a difficult time for the ANC, right? It's hard for them to see this happen.
Absolutely. Jacob Zuma was president of this country for 9 years, Shahan. You know, he was a leader of the ANC. He did many good things in leading the ANC, you know, underground, but also in the difficult times, Shahan, just after 1994, where he intervened, right, in the war, essentially, that was going on in KwaZulu-Natal. Of course, he was rewarded by being made deputy president of the country, fired, and then ascending in a miraculous way to become the president of the ANC. Now, let me tell you why there's a difficulty. A discussion has started, and I was quite puzzled by it yesterday, listening to Richard Spoor, one of the lawyers who had come out after Zuma's lawyers had dumped him to say they will come in pro bono, etc. Now he's singing a tune that says the only way out of this, in order not to break the law, Shahan, is for Zuma to hand himself in, but as soon as he can, as a next step, get the president of this country, Cyril Ramaphosa, to give him presidential pardon. It's unbelievable as it sounds, that he's not even served a day in prison. There are people already saying, no, let him be given pardon, right? I don't know what you feel about something like that, but that's what you're going to have to be dealing with over the next couple of weeks, where people are saying, don't do this, and I think Jimmy Manye started that discussion, apologies them. Mzwanele started that discussion that says, this is an old person, how can we do this? How can we be inhumane? Remember that our correctional services, Shahan, is set up to be humane. This thing that Aviwe is describing, in terms of the medical examination, etc., the fact that there's a hospital there, it's meant to be humane. But we have seen that it has been abused. There was a fellow corrupt chap who has been co-charged with Zuma. You must remember him, Shabir Sheikh, right? The guy was not there for even 2 minutes, and he was already applying for medical parole. And before we knew it, he was playing golf, laughing at the whole system. And believe me, Shahan, those are things that are going to be, facing the ANC in the next couple of weeks, because in there are people who are sympathetic. You've heard how Mbalula, was quite decent in a manner that he wanted to portray the situation, but while keeping the line that says we're all equal before the law, but there's a humanity that we must all exercise. And that's going to kick in as big debates in this country over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and as we stay live on those visuals, the Department of Correctional Services, JJ, has just issued a statement, and I'll read it out to our viewers as we get close to the close of the show. It says, Mr. Jacob Zuma admitted in a correctional center. The Department of Correctional Services can confirm that Mr. Jacob Zuma has been admitted to start serving a 15-month sentence at the Estcourt Correctional Center in KwaZulu-Natal. Mr. Zuma will be taken through all the admission processes as per DCS regulations. Other relevant prescripts pertaining to admitting and orientating newly incarcerated persons will also be followed and executed. Details about the appropriate classification, prerogatives and incarceration conditions can only be determined at the completion of the assessment process to be taken or undertaken by relevant authorities within the employ of DCS. Keeping inmates in a safe and secure custody remains a cardinal to correctional services, and we remain committed to this cause. So that's the statement from the Department of Correctional Services, of course, giving us a little bit more information about what will be happening to Jacob Zuma. I'm sure he's undergoing that medical evaluation. We do know that this Estcourt Correctional Services facility does actually have a medical facility as well, a hospital I was reading earlier, so he could be held there. But that all depends on the assessment process, which Correctional Services is saying will happen. Aviwe, I'm going to give the last word to you in Estcourt as we get ready to close the show. I heard, what was that, a rooster earlier, hey? Because it's that part of the morning already. They're starting to make a noise. That's something Jacob Zuma might or might not hear when he wakes up a little bit later.
One of the sounds that you'll be familiar with, yeah, around this area. I mean, even the media is now starting to converge in the wake of this news, of course, that we brought you live. That presidential convoy essentially coming in here. You'd remember that convoy, in fact, left towards late evening here. My colleague Supermanza Goge was just outside in Kanza when that convoy made its way out. At that time, it was uncertain who was inside it, but now it has been clear. It's the former President Jacob Zuma making his way to the Estcourt Correctional Services. You heard some of what is going to happen according to the Department of Correctional Services. And in fact, a conversation I had with Sibonga Kona Ngumalo, the spokesperson of the Correctional Services, just talking us through that medical examination that was detailed there, that is expected to be underway any moment now within the next 6 hours. Thereafter, the president, of course, being being categorized into what risk level he will be under here. But even outside Westville Prison, just earlier on in the afternoon, you'd see meeting after meeting. We couldn't even speak to the area commissioner there because of the meetings that were ongoing. You remember that KZN as a whole has about 25,000 inmates, Westville being one of the biggest even prisons in the southern hemisphere. But of course, this would be the state-of-the-art facility in terms of having that medical facility separated into two, caters for about 512 inmates. The former prison now joining those inmates there. Unprecedented times, essentially, Shahan, where we're seeing former President Jacob Zuma spending the next 15 months according to that judgment from the Court. Of course, there's still a lot that's going to play out in our courts, starting even on Friday, Pietermaritzburg High Court. That is tomorrow, given that now we are on Thursday. So that matter will be playing out tomorrow, that judgment on whether he should be inside the prison while he waits that issue that is in the highest court of the land, the Constitutional Court, that starts on Monday, that rescinding issue. But at the moment, we saw something that many of us thought we'd never see, Shahan. Former President Jacob Zuma convoy going in to the Estcourt Correctional Services facility, where essentially now the process of having him being one of the inmates in this facility has begun.
All right. Thank you so much for your incredible reporting. Our senior reporter, Aviwe Mtila, is, of course, in Estcourt. JJ, look at, like, I'm sitting like you now. I'm leading. I spent so much time with you, so I'm leading you to the desk the way you do. Thank you also so much for your time, JJ Tabane.
Thank you, Shahan. You steered it fantastically. Well done, and I enjoyed spending the evening with you.
All right. Thanks so much for that. Of course, you'll see JJ again on Monday.